In his final State of the Union speech, U.S. President Barack Obama committed to Project Moonshot, an effort to do for cancer what President John Kennedy's moonshot did for space exploration. Can this kind of a large-scale, all-out offensive make inroads or perhaps even cure cancer? Here to discuss what the new initiative could mean to patients and to researchers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chi Van Dang, director of the University of Pennsylvania's Abramson Cancer Center. In our nation's capital, Gabriel Miller, director of policy and public issues with the Canadian Cancer Society. And here in our studios, Jim Woodgett, director of research of the Lunenfeld Tannenbaum Research Institute at Mount Sinai Hospital, and Ali Henderson, program director of Gilda's Club, Greater Toronto. And it's great to have you four on our program here on TVO tonight. I want to start by reminding everybody who didn't see it, the last State of the Union from President Barack Obama and the Moonshot Pledge. Roll it.
You know, last year, Vice President Biden said that with a new moonshot, America can cure cancer. Last month, he worked with this Congress to give scientists at the National Institutes of Health the strongest resources that they've had in over a decade. So tonight I'm announcing a new national effort to get it done. And because he's gone to the mat for all of us on so many issues over the past 40 years, I'm putting Joe in charge of mission control. For the loved ones we've all lost, for the families that we can still save, let's make America the country that cures cancer once and for all. What do you think, Joe? Make it happen.
So despite the fact that it looked like, if I can read lips, the Vice President was saying, I didn't know that, I didn't know that, Joe Biden's the man. Let's go around the horn on this. Chi Van Dang, your thoughts when you heard the President make that moonshot pledge?
Yeah, no, I was very excited to hear the commitment, the President charging the Vice President to lead the moonshot. For me, it's a call to action. I think there's been a lot of discussion on whether the term moonshot is the correct one, but I look at it as a call to action. It's not an engineering program, putting a man on the moon, but you know, his promise when he came to the University of Pennsylvania on January 15th really is to look at how to break down barriers, get people to work together, and then drive prevention and also new cures for cancer through breaking down silos and then using informatics and information science as well as information technology to make this all happen. And it's not a 100-yard dash. He realizes it's a marathon. So while putting a man on the moon suggests that we can turn around the corner really quickly, this is a commitment over the next number of many years.
Gabriel Miller, oh, first of all, I guess I should clarify your reference to his trip to Pennsylvania. I think the Vice President made his first post-State of the Union trip to your cancer center in Philadelphia, so congratulations to you on that. Gabriel Miller, when you heard about this, what's the first thing that went through your head?
Well, I think the first thing that went through my head was it was encouraging to see a national leader speaking with ambition about a health challenge. And as a Canadian, where we haven't seen a lot of ambition and a lot of goal setting in our health policy in a decade or more, that was an inspiration and encouragement. And I thought that obviously the value of that commitment is going to really depend on the kind of follow-up, the kind of sustained effort that goes with it. And I think also the willingness of the administration to admit that there's a lot they still have to learn, including how to really properly support scientific research, which I think has been a criticism of this approach, that it can be too simplistic. But I think that there's a seed of something very encouraging there for people who want to achieve more with our health and our science investments.
Jim, how would you compare the task ahead of this moonshot compared to the one it's named after of half a century ago?
Well, as Chi mentioned, the terminology is a bit inappropriate, because with the original moonshot, when you had the President talking about a very defined object in the sky, which we could all see, we knew within centimeters how far away it was, and it was very much an engineering challenge. So there's a lot of work had to be done in the 9 years preceding that to pull together that immense billions and billions of dollars of engineering talent and new discovery. But it was a very, very different sort of engineering feat. And unfortunately, biology isn't doesn't sort of fit into that type of model.
Meaning you can't see the moon here, can you?
What we tend to, so there's tons of progress. We've made enormous progress, in fact, over the past 10 years in understanding how, the various molecular changes which occur in cancer, and we have new therapies. But biology has this tremendous way of also getting us to underestimate the complexity. And so it is, I think we definitely need goals. We need to be thinking big. But also we tend to be very much challenged by new discoveries and the knowledge that we don't have. Everything we tend to do tends to reveal what we don't know. And so it's a great ambition, and I think it's a very, very important element politically to have politicians like Barack Obama and our own government getting behind research, but it's an enormous challenge.
Let's get Ali to weigh in on the issue of the moonshot as a metaphor for what he's trying to do with cancer. What'd you think?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's a modern day, I have a dream. I completely agree that we need to be looking at resources, and resources are going to go into research, and that's where we're going to be finding the cure. I think we need to evaluate a little bit more specifically where those resources go. I love people coming together and having cancer fighters say, how can we work together in the best way, most efficient way possible? There's a small disconnect for me in the sense of, this is a great idea. I hope it happens within the next 5 years. I hope it happens in my lifetime. But I work with the patients every single day. So their lives, their lived experiences, that's what's on my mind. And I want to know how we can use resources and funding the best way possible to, yes, find a cure, but to help patients and their families every day.
Here's what Joe Biden said ought to be the two main goals of his Project Moonshot. Number one, increase resources, both private and public, to fight cancer. Number two, break down silos and bring all the cancer fighters together to work together, share information, and end cancer as we know it. So, Chi, can you tell us, those are the broad strokes, what does that actually mean on the ground where you are fighting cancer in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so it means a lot of things. So I think if we look internally, the purpose of cancer centers is to really catalyze cancer research and break down barriers within an institution. And this is being done throughout. I think the next challenge would be, and I'm very privileged to be the current chair of the National Cancer Institute Board of Scientific Advisors. And one of the things I'm trying to push along, the idea that there needs to be incentive to work even between cancer centers so that we bring together teams to answer big questions, put the right resources in, find the right expertise that are complementary, and then go after it in a very, very big way. I think what we've been maybe our worst enemy, and I think this is where striking a balance is very important, which is competition has been very healthy. I think competition has already generated vast amount of information that Jim alluded to, and every time we reveal something new, we don't understand something else. But I think we've gotten to the point, and I think that most of us will agree, that after the Cancer Genome Atlas, as well as many other things that have been done with new drugs, immunotherapy, that we've gotten to a crossroads where I think collaboration is going to break the barriers much faster than working on things alone. And I think this paradigm now has played out in foundation grants. You will hear announcements of additional collaborative efforts that is very large in the next couple of months. Coming out of the U.S., where multiple institutions are getting together with vast resources to either do immunotherapy or new drug discovery. And I really think that this is where it's going to go. We go within the institution to break down barriers, getting expertise to come along, people who work in mathematics to come along with biologists. But we need to go beyond that, because not all the expertise can be found within a single institution. And so we really need to kind of broaden out and keep an eye on the prize. And for me, for someone who's taking care of cancer patients and have family members with cancer who've died from cancer, I think the problem is very close home, and the eye on the prize is really to bring new things to patients, and not so much the personal rewards that's been driving the our academy for many years. And in fact, that will come along.
Let me follow up with Jim on this. Let me follow up with Jim on this. Are you all, I'm going to ask you a candid question here, are you all just far too competitive with each other to break down these silos and share information and make the kind of progress the VP is talking about?
I don't think so. And I think Xi, by bringing this to the attention of this conversation, talking about collaboration, I don't want to leave the impression that scientists around the world aren't collaborating, both within institutions and between countries.
So what does he mean when he says break down the silos?
Well, there are different types of silos, right, which are very artificial in many cases. So, for example, you have disciplinary silos, where you have a particular type of science with a scientist with a particular background who doesn't necessarily talk to another scientist because he actually doesn't understand or she doesn't understand the language, because science is full of jargon. And also progress moves in various different ways. And we often find, and we see this in engineering as well as in biology and physics, that the biggest breakthroughs tend to come when disciplines come together at the edges. And so that cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary advantage is only realized when you do have people of different backgrounds coming together.
And you think that can happen?
Oh, that does happen. I think we've got to make sure that there are forces which perhaps for various reasons we're human, we want to make sure that there's appropriate credit and that sort of thing. We need to make sure those forces are way behind the common good, which is to make progress. And I think not in just in cancer research, but in many areas of science, there's tremendous collaboration and interaction. But anything which helps to bring those barriers down, I think. But they are artificial barriers, and they shouldn't be there.
Let me get Gabriel on that. Do we have in this country, Gabriel, too many artificial barriers, too many silos, which prohibit, or I guess inhibit, collaboration and stop us getting to the finish line as quickly as we ought to?
Well, in terms of the silos inside the scientific community or between research institutions, I'll certainly defer to Qi and Jim. I'll tell you, in terms of public policy and the governments who, at the end of the day, are by far the largest investors both in cancer care and in health and cancer research, the silos are very real and a very troubling barrier to how effectively we meet this challenge. How effectively we set priorities, and how quickly, as you say, we get across the finish line. I mean, if you look at our overall approach to health in this country, the truth is research is a very small fraction of where our health-related investments go. Federal and provincial governments spend $160 billion or so every year providing health care to Canadians, but together I think spend less than $1 billion on health research. But there's very little discussion among our elected leaders about that ratio and how the different parts of that health system fit together, and most importantly, how they are designed to achieve results and advance the interests of real people who are fighting real diseases. So politically, and in terms of bureaucracy, I think the silos are real, and they probably, in my view, are the most immediate challenge we do need to overcome.
Ali, do you see that problem as well?
Yes, I do. I think that people work independently, whether that be you're looking at a government level, hospitals, universities, the community. I think, every day at Gilda's Club, we try to change that by strengthening our relationships with local hospitals so that we're helping patients and their families the best way possible. But I think there's a lot of work still that can be done.
Just take a second. Tell us what Gilda's Club does.
Thank you. Gilda's Club is a not-for-profit organization. We provide psychosocial and emotional support to anybody touched by cancer. We start with kids at age 4 and go to any age after that. And it's for children, teens, and adults.
In Toronto only?
It's in Toronto, our location. There's a second location in Barrie, and there's 52 locations across North America.
Okay. We know that there are billions upon billions, Qi, spent on cancer across the board. Treatment, research, the whole gamut. And I want to get a better understanding of what $1 billion actually buys you these days.
Well, so I would say that $1 billion would be just a start. I mean, if you look at the National Cancer Institute budget, it's in the arena of about $4 billion to $5 billion a year. And so if you add another billion on top of that and you spread it out over several years, actually that's a large increment in relative to the total annual budget, because the total annual budget, about 80% of it is already committed. And so there's very little leeway for the U.S. National Cancer Institute to really go down different directions. And I think with a new opportunity, you really want to challenge the community to come up with big ideas, high risk, high gain kind of area. You have to bet on certain directions that are promising. Not that every direction we take is going to make a hit, as Jim already alluded to. Biology is very complex, but we really got to invest in big ideas, bold ideas, and get there quickly. And then just, if you go down a road and it's a blind alley, just go down a different road. So we can, with that amount of money, I think that it is substantive. I think that we can challenge the community to go down the themes that's been outlined by the Vice President. For example, prevention, new biomarkers, early detection, immunotherapy, combination therapy, learning how the cancer cells live among normal cells, the so-called stroma. So there are many different areas of science that can be opened up. But I think that a sense of urgency is what's going to be a little bit different about this moonshot versus the business as usual, which is we put a grant in, you wait, you don't get to wait next cycle. I think the nimbleness with this new money is going to be critically important as it's being designed to really put out there for the community, which is act fast, make quick decisions. Many of them may not work, but you only need a few hits to really make a big difference and change the inflection of the pathway of we take care of cancer patients.
Jim, let me ask you about, we say cancer, but there's really no such thing as cancer, right? It's 200 different kinds of cancer that we're talking about here.
Or more.
Or more, yeah. 200 or more. My question is, are all cancers going to benefit equally from this new moonshot on cancer?
No, the easy answer is no. However, the more difficult answer here is that we're going to see there should be advances in all areas of cancer treatment and prevention, and the fundamental principles which underlie how a normal cell, how our normal tissues become cancerous. We have a pretty good understanding of that, and these mechanisms are actually quite similar. It's not as though a skin cancer is necessarily changing the same genes, has mutations in the same gene, different genes than, say, a brain cancer. We keep seeing the same genes coming up. And so that is actually a big change over the past 20 or 30 years, where we used to define cancers by their site. It was a kidney cancer or breast cancer or liver cancer. We know that the underlying mechanisms are very, very similar. And so that's also helping, because we can also then say there are some aspects, for example, of a liver cancer, which are very much more similar to pancreatic cancer, to some forms of melanoma, than to other forms of liver cancer. And as you might imagine, in that case, the therapies which are applicable to a particular cancer may be applicable to cancers which go by very, very different names. So that stratification or dissection of the different types of underlying molecular mechanism underlying the cancers has been very important. So that's why if we find a new type of therapy which may benefit a particular type of melanoma or leukemia, it may have application to, if you like, off-target or off-tissue types of cancers as well.
I'm not going to say, Ali, that I'm going to cut you a check for $1 billion, even though the president said that he was going to cut a check for $1 billion. I'm sure you would welcome it. But I do want to get a better understanding of what you do with the money and where it comes from. Yeah. So let's start with that. Who's your funder?
So the funders, it's a tough question. We don't receive any government funding at Gilda's Club, which means our staff work very, very hard. We look for individual donations in the community. We have large fundraisers. It could be third-party events, corporate donations. $1 billion, I don't know how to wrap my head around $1 billion. We have $1 million budget every year, and we work very hard to raise that money. Looking at resources and where they're spent within the community, I think the little guy, if you will, is often forgotten, and we are doing the important work.
Are you the little guy?
It feels that way. It feels that way. When we even talking about $1 billion and thinking about that going to cancer research or hospital foundations, I don't think that they should not be going there. The money should not be going there, but I think we need to be a little bit more diverse and spread the money out in different areas in the community.
Gabriel, how about the Cancer Society? Where do you get your money from?
The vast majority of our money comes from individual donations from Canadians, and a huge percentage of that in donations of $20 at a time that people make, whether at their local events or door-to-door fundraising. And then there are a few programs we deliver in partnership with government that we receive funding for.
And Jim, your research institute, where do you get your money from?
From the Canadian Cancer Society for one, the federal government, from donors, to our foundation, essentially, it all comes back to the taxpayer, people who are either giving through philanthropic donations or through the federal or provincial governments.
Well, she says she doesn't get any money from the taxpayer.
Well, we get a lot of money from the taxpayers. As part of, and again in perspective, when you look at how much we're spending as taxpayers on our healthcare system, and the number of people that cancer impacts. And of course, we work in lots of other areas of disease research as well as cancer. The ratio, if you were a company, a successful company, and you had an R&D budget, which was 0.6% of your total activities, you probably wouldn't last very long. And that's unfortunately where we stand right now.
And what's your annual budget?
We have a budget of about $90 million a year.
90 million.
Yeah.
So you're 90 Gilda's clubs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Basically, to look at it that way. Chi, what's your annual budget and where does it come from?
Yeah, so annual budget depends on the accounting. Could be, it's well over 50 million, but some years is over 100 million, depending on what kind of activities we have. So our budget really comes from a number of different sources: the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Health, so non-cancer grants. We also have foundation grants, and we have a large fraction in terms of industry support, whether through clinical trials or even collaborative research agreements. And then of course, philanthropy plays a significant role for us every year. So we get about roughly about $20 to $30 million of commitment from philanthropists every year. So that's kind of collectively how we run the Cancer Center. Okay,
I ask all of you this because obviously one of the things I want to get a better understanding of is when the President of the United States says, we're going to do a moonshot, not going to the moon, but on curing cancer, how does that affect your ability to raise money? Chi, you want to start us off on that?
I think it affects it a lot because, you know, the fact that a very affable person, a lot of personality that really can attract even, you know, talking to billionaires. I think it's very helpful for the Vice President to be out there challenging philanthropists to contribute to this moonshot. And in fact, yesterday, they announced down at Johns Hopkins a $125 million collective gift from Mr. Bloomberg and Kimmel to start the Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy at Hopkins. So again, the Vice President was there, really leveraging the moonshot initiative to really get philanthropists to come on board. And I think this is like I said, it's a call to action to all of us, researchers, donors, advocates, patients, to really come out there to make this happen. So it's very, very helpful.
Gabriel, I don't know whether the President of the United States making an announcement down south has impact on what happens north of the border, but you can tell me, does it?
I think in principle it does. I think on an announcement in this specific case, I think the reaction probably north of the border was, let's see where this goes in the States and whether it'll come to Canada. But I think the idea of someone with real power and real influence getting up and saying, we're headed somewhere important, somewhere great, somewhere ambitious on this disease is very important and very inspiring. You know, I think fundamentally at the end of the day, the greatest risk to the cancer challenge is resignation. It's the feeling that cancer is just a fact of life, death, taxes, and cancer, that will drain the determination and the resources away from the innovators, from the researchers, from the caregivers who ultimately can really make progress on this. And I think there is the need to rebuild some morale among people concerned about cancer. You know, I think in the last 25 or 30 years, it feels a bit to people like they were climbing a mountain and they got to the top and they discovered they were actually climbing a chain of mountains. And there's still a long way to go, but I think the President saying this says we're not just going to sit here and give up. We're going to keep at it because we can get there.
Jim, the impact on you? President's announcement?
It's sort of indirect. I would say, as I mentioned before, we have a lot of collaborations, including many in the States. And I think it's also fair to say that over the past, well, since the recession, the amount of funding going into research, cancer research, as well as other types of medical and biomedical research, has pretty much flatlined. So this is helping. So it's going to help our American colleagues and hopefully encourage others too. The question, and you've alluded to it at various points, is that will it make a big enough difference? Is it a step? And of course, politicians don't like to talk about increments. They want to have sound bites. And I think what's clearly important here is that this is seen as a program. This is seen as an initiative which has legs, and it's not just going to be dropped off the next year in the State of the Union address when we have some other moonshot for some other type of disease, or maybe dealing with unemployment or something else. So we've got to be a little bit careful because we've seen this before, of course, with other initiatives.
Here's some of the initial feedback on the president's moonshot pledge. This is a new poll by an organization called STAT, the new Boston Globe Health website, and the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And they've found, let's bring this up, Sheldon, more than 8 out of 10 Americans support at least a 20% increase, 20%, for federal cancer research funding, the amount the president has requested for the National Cancer Moonshot, which is being led by VP Joe Biden, as we've said. According to the poll, 46% said the funding increase is about right, 37% said it's not enough. Backing for Obama's moonshot was bipartisan, 90% of Democrats, 79% of Republicans supporting at least a 20% boost in cancer research spending. I got to believe, Ali, that if anything out there gets that much support for a 20% increase in spending, that's pretty impressive. On the other hand, do you think everybody understands the implications of what it takes to actually make that happen?
Right. No, I don't think they do. I don't think they do.
And what are the implications of making that happen?
I think, all of these ideas are great. It's great seeing money go into research. What about the patients? So I completely agree with Vice President Biden, and I think he's got a really great initiative ahead of him. But the patient's voice doesn't seem to be a strong voice right now. The patients and their families, their loved ones, what their experiences are. If we are fighting every day to get enough money to run a weekly Living with Cancer support group at Gilda's Club Greater Toronto, and we're talking about a few $100s at a time to run that group, and then we're looking at how much the population is paying in taxes going into government funding for cancer, it doesn't make sense to me. I think we really need to look at that and streamline where resources are going in a more effective way.
If the patient voice isn't the loudest, whose voice is when it comes to cancer?
I feel that clearly, patient and family services are critically important for our cancer center, and it's very difficult to get, at least in the U.S., any kind of federal funding directly for that because it's all in form of peer review funding. So the way we drive that, at least to the Abramson Cancer Center, is through our philanthropists, and we do have very nice family and patient services through philanthropy and also through the support of our health system. So I think I hear the message very clearly. If the government could somehow help in this context, that would be terrific. But I think the way that it is going to happen in the U.S. is that a lot of this money is going to go through a peer review, scientific review system to really look for innovative new ideas, and maybe somehow riding on that moonshot that the government would step up in terms of patient and family services as well.
Ali, you want to come back on that?
I think that I agree with those sentiments, and I think it's great that they're putting that at the forefront. It just doesn't seem to hold the same weight as when we look at money when it's going into research. I think that we need to take a step back and just, as I said before, evaluate where we're putting money to make sure that we're hearing those voices. We look at stats in the US, which are often more prevalent than in Canada, but if we see that 72% of Americans didn't know they had access to psychosocial care while they were having their cancer diagnosis, that's a pretty large number to me, and that causes concern for me. So then I think, where are we putting money, and are we helping patients the best way possible?
Let me read some. It's a bit odd in a discussion about cancer to be quoting an automotive editor of a magazine called Ars Technica. But here's what Jonathan Gitlin had to say about all of what we've been talking about. Unfortunately, he writes, this isn't the first or even second time we've had a poorly defined science project dropped on us by the current well-meaning occupant of the White House. In 2013, we got the BRAIN Initiative. Last year, it was the Personalized Medicine Initiative. In both cases, the pattern was flashy announcement first, followed by a year or more of meetings, workshops, and conference calls where researchers and policymakers had to sit down and work out what the actual scientific questions were supposed to be and what they could actually accomplish with the amounts of money on offer, which in both cases, I'd argue, were inadequate for the problem at hand. Chi, I lose my satellite to you in a minute, so let me give you a minute to respond to that and say and tell us whether you think Jonathan's onto something with that quote.
Well, you know, I have to say that whenever there's an idea, a new initiative, there will be naysayers. There will also be people who are not at the table and part of the party, right? But if you look at the Personalized Medicine Initiative, it actually has made some impact. Putting the additional resources into NIH and NCI, I know right now there are ongoing clinical trials that's called the MATCH trial that's supported by the Personalized Medicine that is very complex. It is complex in bringing many, many different institutions together to do a big clinical trial, to bring different pharmaceutical companies together to be able to contribute drug A and combine it to drug B, which is an issue in terms of silos. So it has already changed some of the paradigm on how we do science, how do we do clinical trials, and to bring something new to patients who have unique features in their cancers, so-called personalized cancer medicine. Similarly, the NIH is doing a very large study that collecting and following many thousands of patients to really look at outcomes in various types of diseases. So I think that I would look at it a little bit differently. The call to action, actually there is action. And I really look at this new moonshot for the National Cancer Moonshot, again, when and if the funding is made available. There's already a task force that's been appointed by the Vice President to break down barriers within the federal government. And then for the NCI and the National Cancer Advisory Board, there will be a blue ribbon panel built out of about 20 scientists and medical scientists to really identify areas that we should go after that are low-hanging fruits. So
okay,
I really,
Chi, before I lose my line to Philadelphia and Ottawa, and therefore don't get a chance to thank you for being on the program, let me thank Chi Van Dang from the Abramson Cancer Center in Philadelphia and Gabriel Miller from the Canadian Cancer Society in Ottawa. Thanks to both of you for being on the program tonight. Jim, I do want to give you a chance, though, to speak to that quote, which sounds, I don't know if it's cynical, but it's certainly somebody who's seen this movie before and doesn't want to see it again.
I think part of the answer to this is that, you know, in the numbers you gave before, it's pretty difficult to see, to imagine context in the House of Congress, where you have the Republicans and the Democrats agreeing to the same sort of legislation, the same sort of initiative to the same degree. And so there's a political point to this, clearly. And that's okay, right? That's far better to me than you don't get a lot of an F-35 fighter for $1 billion. Much better that it's supporting understanding of and development of new treatments and better preventions for cancer. But there is this political element, and I think what Jonathan Gitlin was getting at here is that we've sort of seen this before, and so the important element to this is that it has legs, that it's actually seen through. And that the public actually sees that those milestones which are being developed now are being met. And I think that's going to be very difficult. Again, it's coming back to the moonshot analogy. It's a lousy analogy. It allows people, it very succinctly tells them, in that case, in the early 60s, what the goal was. It's easy to say we want to cure cancer, but it's much, much more difficult to do that, even for one cancer, than it is to put 12 men on the moon.
Do we have a problem here, Ali, of raising expectations to a point where they really can't be met, not in the long run? I mean, you're the youngest person on this program tonight, and even you weren't sure that this was going to happen in your lifetime.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. I love the enthusiasm and I love the positivity of the message that's coming from the United States. I hope that's the case. Every single day, I'm seeing more and more people come through our doors at Gilda's Club. I'm seeing more and more young adults come through the doors. That unnerves me. So I'm not sure what the future has for cancer. I think the important piece is right now that we are addressing patients and their loved ones' needs while research keeps on trucking along, and hopefully they do come with a cure. I'm very hopeful for that. But I do want the focus still to be on getting people through their disease today.
Having already thanked our out-of-town guests, I want to add my thanks to you too as well. Jim Woodgett from the Lunenfeld Tannenbaum Research Institute at Mount Sinai, Ali Henderson, Gilda's Club, Greater Toronto. It's good of both of you to be on our program tonight as well.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.